But what does it say? Your bet's as good as mine. Anyway, earlier on this evening, 7 o'clock, there's a new series of This Is Your Life. Michael Aspel returns to host the new show. At 7:30, Ivy has to face more wrath from Martin. But now, it's time for This Morning with Richard and Judy.
Yes, good morning. Oh dear, there's been much wailing and gnashing of teeth because, yes, today is ITV Franchise Day, where there are more losers than winners in what's been called the sale of the century, not to mention the biggest government farce since the poll tax.
Well, today the months of uncertainty are finally over. The franchises have been awarded and in some cases taken away, and in a minute we'll be looking at how that is going to affect your favourite programmes as ITV heads into the 21st century. Meanwhile, this is how we're going to head into the next 90 minutes. The future boy Michael J. Fox finally grows up as a madcap medic in the hit film Doc Hollywood.
And it's action stations for the female star of London's Burning, Tales from the Blue Watch, with Samantha Beckinsale.
And just after midday, we reach a lyrical level with chart-busting group level 42.
Now, last night, a top American judge successfully fought off allegations of sexual harassment, but the controversy rages on. And what do you think constitutes harassment? When is an arm around the shoulder a friendly gesture, and when does it become a sexual one? Well, we want your opinions and your experiences, so please phone in.
If you've been a victim of it, or you've been wrongly accused of doing it, or you've simply got a strong opinion, phone 051 555 1000 for our special sexual harassment forum with Agony Aunt Denise Robertson. Meanwhile, a rundown of the rest of the show.
First, hot news, hot news. It's ITV Franchise Day, and here's a quick rundown of how the results announced about half an hour ago affect some of the nation's biggest stars and top-rated programmes. Thames has been sold down the river, so maybe bang goes the bill, Minder, and This Is Your Life.
And it's all changed for the face of breakfast television as TVAM loses the morning sofa slot to Sunrise TV.
But they're dancing in the street with stars in their eyes here at Granada as Phil Redmond sent packing back to Brookside. The street is safe.
And you bet there'll be plenty more blind dates for Scylla, as surprise, surprise, LWT hangs on to its franchise.
But a twist in the tale for the makers of the Ruth Rendell Mysteries. TVS lose their franchise agonisingly because they bid too much money.
Well, for more news on the changing face of independent television, we're going over to ITN's Nicholas Owen, who's inside the ITC headquarters in London, from where the announcements have just been made. Morning, Nick.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, I mean, the people who've lost, there doesn't seem to be much logic to it in terms of finance. We all believed it was down to the highest bids, but that's not the way it's turned out.
No, it's much more complicated than that, really. High bids mattered a great deal, but so did quality. Anybody who came up with a really rubbishy idea for programmes didn't get a look in. And there was also the problem that some people bid far too much. Remember, the money has to be paid every single year in cash to the Treasury. So the ITC thought that some companies, notably TVS down in the south of England, bid too much money which wouldn't be available to carry on programme making. So there was a blend of the things, but the highest cash bid, generally speaking, was the deciding factor.
But just to pick up this TVS story, I mean, I would have thought to most disinterested observers it would seem grotesquely unfair that if a system is introduced where it is essentially said that the highest bidder is going to win, so that they lump in all the money that they possibly can, and they're disqualified for putting in too much. It's not a rum way to run an auction, isn't it?
Well, George Russell of the ITC said the people who got into this knew the rules in advance. As I was just saying, they are a bit complicated. It wasn't just a matter of bidding very high. It was, frankly, you know, the biggest game of poker in the world, and only at the last minute did you know whether you'd succeeded or not. You might easily have found yourself in the position, some companies have, of bidding rather too much money and wish they hadn't.
Is there likely to be any sort of recourse for companies like TVS? Is there any kind of court of appeal, anything they can do?
Well, yes, there is. They can appeal, I think, through the courts. I mean, George Russell, again, was asked about that this morning. He said he didn't anticipate that anybody would do that because, again, they all knew the rules before they started. But they might well challenge the ITC's decision. It could well drag on through the rest of 1992 right up until the 1993 deadline. I fancy that nobody will really bother to do that. And one of the reasons is that even companies that have lost, if they're making good programs, there's nothing to stop them selling those programs to the winners, to the BBC, to Sky, the satellite channels, even new satellite channels, so they can go on making programs.
So in other words, for example, the programs that Thames Television have made, such as Minder, we could continue to see that program still being made by Thames, but as you say, sold off to their successors.
I think you definitely will still see them. People who make good programs, no matter where they come from, are going to get them on air.
Just very quickly, you've heard the speech that was made by George Russell of the ITC. Did you get the impression, listening to what he said, and as you say, it was all very complicated, that he was personally uncomfortable at presiding over such a mishmash of a way to award a franchise?
No, I don't think he was, really. He's a great realist, Mr. Russell. He knew this is what Parliament had decided, this was the way it was going to be done, and he got on and did the job. I don't think he's sort of saying to himself, oh dear, I wish I didn't have to do this. I think he believes in it, you know.
Does he?
Does he?
He's a man of...
I
think so.
I hope everybody else does, and I hope people do keep their favourite programmes. Thank you very much indeed, Nick.
Thanks for joining us, Nick. We'll see you later.
Over to ITN for the latest news, a great deal of which I should imagine is going to be about the awarding of the ITV franchises from Sue Carpenter.
Quite right, Judy. Good morning. 4 ITV companies have lost their licences to broadcast from 1993. New franchises were announced by the Independent Television Commission in the past hour. Out goes the largest company, Thames in London, to be replaced by Carlton Television. The national breakfast time broadcaster, TVAM, has lost to Sunrise Television. TVS in the south is replaced by Meridian Broadcasting, and TSW in the southwest has lost to West Country Television. Companies keeping their franchises are London Weekend, Central, Granada, Yorkshire, HTV, Anglia, Tyne Tees, Scottish, Grampian, Border, Ulster and Channel. In a total of 8 cases, the licence did not go to the company making the highest bid.
Here it comes.
This was how they broke the news. A battery of fax machines printing out the names of the companies who'll control the ITV network into the next century. Months of waiting and speculation ended at exactly 10 o'clock this morning as the chairman of the Independent Television Commission, George Russell, announced the winners of the 16 ITV franchises.
The awards will bring change to ITV. There are 4 new players, including sizable publisher licensees, which will expand the independent sector. The Treasury gets a little more money. Even so, there is a commitment in the licence applications to higher network expenditure. Both the viewer and the advertiser should continue to get the quality they want.
Out is Thames Television, the biggest supplier to the ITV network. Its programmes include This Week and the top-rated police series, The Bill. Thames was outbid by Carlton Television, the broadcasting and media services company. Thames says it'll turn itself into an independent producer, and its programmes such as Minder could be sold to the BBC or satellite television. TVAM, the most profitable ITV company, with 2/3 of the breakfast audience, is also out, losing to a bid by Sunrise, the company backed by LWT and Disney. TVS, broadcasting in the south and southeast, produces the critically acclaimed Ruth Rendell mystery series. The TVS bid was thought to be too high to ensure quality, and the ITC awarded the franchise to Meridian. And in the southwest, a high bid by TSW failed to save its franchise. It lost to West Country Television.
What do the Bill, Minder and the Ruth Rendell mysteries all have in common? Well, an hour and a half ago, the companies who made them faced going out of business. They were the losers in the great TV auction called the Franchise War. But what was it all about?
I don't really know.
All I know is Granada's been thought of taken over by the guy from Brookside.
I would assume it's something to do with the competition, you know, from the government within all industry.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen.
Some companies trying to buy out the other companies.
I haven't a clue.
All I really know is that I hope Granada gets it.
Joining me now are 2 of the generals from the Franchise War, Paul Jackson, who won in London, and Phil Redmond, who lost in Liverpool. Now, Phil, can I ask you first? You lost the war. How are you feeling?
A bit surprised and astonished, really, because it's very difficult to respond to a decision that you can't understand.
Well, look, why do you think you lost?
Well, we don't know, because, I mean, the thing that's exercising our minds at the moment is that 2 of our major shareholders, Yorkshire Television, have passed the quality threshold in their region. Tyne Tees passed the quality threshold in their region. Yet Yorkshire, Tyne Tees and Mersey in the North West doesn't get through the quality threshold. And that just seems astonishing.
Do you think it is quality versus money? Because Granada, for instance, only bid 9 million and you bid 35 million. Do you really think you lost out on quality?
Well, that's the decision that the ITC have given us. They've just said that our programme service doesn't meet the requirements of the Broadcasting Act. That's all we can go on. I think the actual bid of Granada at 9 million is astonishing too, because it's almost a derisory figure. It isn't a commercially engineered low bid like Central and Scottish, nor does it actually reflect the value of the service. So there's going to be £26 million just sort of sloshing around inside Granada.
So if you think you lost it perhaps on quality, Phil, what were the kind of programmes that you were suggesting that they didn't like?
Well, again, it's very hard for me to comment on this because we just don't understand and they haven't given us any reasons. But what we were trying to do was to strengthen the ITV system and offer pretty much a kind of conventional offerings to the ITV network, but at the same time offering a very innovative and radical regional broadcasting system which would give people in the northwest a regional broadcaster which was different from anywhere in Britain, not just with Granada.
Okay, Phil, thanks. I'll come back to you in a minute. Paul Jackson in London, hello.
Hi.
How are you feeling as the victor? You look very splendid. You've got a victor's tie on, it seems to me.
Well, I like a bit of colour in my life room. Yes, I mean, we're thrilled, obviously. We're very, very pleased. But we've got a huge mountain to climb now. It's a huge challenge. We've won the London weekday licence. We've got 14 months to get a programme service on the air, and that's, you know, not enough, very little time.
Well, you've won, Mr. Jackson, but frankly, you worry me. I mean, what's going to happen to all our favourite programmes, like The Bill, The Minder, and This Is Your Life? Are they all going to go off air? We'll never see them again?
No, I'm glad to allay your worries or fears, Miriam, on that front. That, of course, isn't a decision for Carlton. Thames will now have to decide how they want to proceed. I suspect that they'll want to stay in business as programme makers. They've only lost the licence to broadcast. They're perfectly able to stay in business as programme makers, and they've got some very good hit shows. You've just mentioned 3 of them. They'll doubtless want to offer those to the new schedule, which the new person who's going to be created in the next few months to run the new Channel 3. And I'm sure if they offer quality programmes that they'll have a place in the network, and we will benefit from that network, so we're delighted it should be as strong as possible.
Well, look, it's the viewer you serve. What's
Absolutely.
the viewer going to get from your running the company rather than Thames?
Well, I hope the viewer is, as I say, going to get certainly some returning old favourites. Horror stories about Coronation Street have not turned out to be true, but I think from what we are committed to at Carlton is the industry's changed a lot over the last few years, and some of the best programme makers across all the fields of programmes, drama, entertainment, documentary and so on, a lot of the best programme makers have chosen over the last 5 or 6 years to leave the big companies, whether they be the BBC or the independent companies, and go out on their own, set up their own businesses and produce their own programmes for themselves and then offer them to the broadcasters. And so far it's been quite difficult for those companies to get on to popular television. Obviously Channel 4 has been a very important home for them, but a lot of those programme makers, I think, have great skill, great energy, great creative talent, and they will now have, with the arrival not only of Carlton, but of Meridian in the south, they will have a much more direct route of access through to Channel 3, and I think they will strengthen Channel 3.
Now, you make it all sound rather persuasive, but I still have a few worries. You're going to be giving all that money to the government. Aren't you going to be forced to give us cheap TV, bought-in films, soaps, quizzes, in fact, a licence to print money and lower standards?
Well, I really don't think all the jokes about a licence to borrow money, which David Frost was making a few months ago, I don't think the licence to print money is the truth anymore. We have made a prudent bid. I'm delighted we've revealed the level of our bid this morning. It's interesting, it's some 10 million lower than was being quoted as recently as this Sunday in the Sunday papers. It's a prudent bid. It's a bid which we expect to make a return to shareholders in the first year, but also more than adequate to provide a very, very top-rate programme service. We had to demonstrate that to the ITC in our business plan, and they have obviously taken the view that we demonstrated it fairly.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I just have one last word with you, Phil? And that is, do you think that Granada, who's been at it a long time now, can keep supplying programmes to the network the way it has? Can it keep up its standards?
Well, Granada will carry on doing what they've always been doing. I mean, Paul made the point. I mean, the industry's changed so much over the last years. Most of the best programmes now are going to be made by independents, and there's going to be a lot of money knocking around the ITV system that should have actually gone to the Treasury to fund education and health. And I think that's where the ITC failed in this process.
Can I
but on a
just
final point, I'll just say that if Paul would look in his diary tomorrow and see if he's got a free space, I'll be down tomorrow to tell him a few good ideas.
Very good, Paul.
Bad luck, mate, by the way, and it'd be lovely to see you.
Keep an eye open for Phil. Hey, Phil, thanks very much for coming in to talk to us, and you too, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.